So hello there, my name is Andrew Sweeney. Welcome to my podcast. This is the second in a series of talks I'm doing about Jordan Peterson and his conversation partners. And this episode is about Russell Brand. I don't hate Russell Brand, even though it is rather fashionable to do so if you're an intellectual hipster. In fact, I like him a lot. I'm impressed by the way he has taken his rather noxious earlier self, the celebrity New Age druggie, and cleaned up his room in Petersonian lingo. In other words, he has transformed into an engaged, effusive, and intelligent person, a kind of working class hero. Brand has taken stand-up comedy into the political realm, where it is needed. Politics requires comedy to counter hubris. Divine comedy redeems worldly politics. On a deeper level, the comedian can go where the rest of us don't dare to, deep into the pit of the collective madness. Comedians objectify our inner idiot, and therefore, by making the idiot visible, free us from him. I was encouraged to see that Brand had invited Peterson on his podcast, that the so-called bourgeois leftist is finally talking with the so-called alt-right provocateur. But these are silly reductions. And anyone who listens to this podcast can see through the nonsense that Peterson has anything to do with right-wing ideology, or that he hates marginal people, or that he is indifferent to the wealth distribution problem, to name a few of the numerous ways he isn't a fascist. Peterson was warm and compassionate in the interview, contrary to his firebrand image, and Brand was not the bimbo he is described as by haters. The conversation went well. Peterson seemed in his element and was less combative than one would expect, and there was much common ground touched on. I'm interested in common ground between Peterson and the leftists for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Peterson's frontal attack on postmodernism and Marxism has meant that a lot of leftists are missing out on him. They have been duped into believing that Peterson is a sort of intellectual version of Trump, a dangerous reactionary or conservative. The thing is, Peterson is not tribal. He simply disturbs people because they don't know what box to put him in. Sometimes he sounds like a conservative, and at other times a centrist. Sometimes he has leftist concerns. At other times, he is an evil capitalist, in his own words. And because he has a far-ranging and nuanced view of humanity, he is able to converse with all types. This is one of the things that makes him so valuable. He is a genuine peacemaker. Can he actually help the leftists go beyond postmodern identity politics, just as he has helped right-wingers move away from the extremes? Peterson has said, the proper concern of the left is to provide a political voice for the working class. These are not exactly the words of a typical right-wing Republican. Today, if you are unclassifiable, you might get pilloried by the authoritarian leftists, even if you have the usual leftist concerns, such as distribution of wealth, healthcare, exploitation of resources, racism, etc. You might get called a reactionary, a transphobic, a vampire squid patriarch, to name a few of the politer labels, if you go off the rails, that is. You might even be attacked if you suggest that, for instance, there are some biological and psychological differences between men and women, which should be a truism, and even celebrated if one cares about diversity, that is. In Peterson's case, there isn't actually any evidence for the nasty labels he is branded with, so his critics are grasping for straws. The haters need somebody to hate, and so the best they can do is call him the angry white man, with the implied racist epitaph, forgetting that he is an actual member of an indigenous tribe from British Columbia. Alice Alaji is my Kawaka Waka name, tweeted Peterson this summer. What kind of racist transphobe has a sweat lodge in his attic? You might ask. Will the press soon accuse Peterson of cultural appropriation? Or is that going too far, even for the mandarins of the Canadian media? We all love our categories. According to the lying media, who inspire me to capriciously use Donald Trump's phrase, Brand will always be a bourgeois leftist and Peterson an alt-right provocateur. Never mind what they actually say. People will peddle their caricatures and box-like representations constantly in their fashionable little bubbles of political correctness where they can safely hate cartoon characters of their own imagination. It seems to me that they don't even know why they hate Peterson. Something is happening and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? I want to sing to these Canadian journalists who are like the devouring mother, and nobody has been more nasty to Peterson than the emissaries of his own culture. But what if we use this nice catchphrase to orient these confused journalists, to make them more happy, or more than likely unhappy? What if we called Peterson and Brand as well working class heroes? There might be good reason to. Peterson has worked as a dishwasher and on the railways in northern Alberta. Brand was a street kid and a sexual abuse survivor who left home at the age of 16. Brand comes from a London suburb and Peterson from a suburb of hell, i.e. northern Alberta. Both are outsiders who have found a way into the public eye. They have worked their way up the competence hierarchies, to use Peterson's phrase, while not losing their souls. No easy task. They have both hit bottom with drugs and alcohol and depression issues, but then decided at a certain point in their lives to be of service to others instead of letting their demons get the best of them. Brand and Peterson have worked tirelessly on behalf of people, both the privileged and the deplorables, Peterson in his clinical practice and Brand in his activism. Brand, for instance, has done fearless documentaries about Nazi skinheads. He has even kissed a notorious homophobe from the Westboro Baptist Church. Peterson claims his lectures have brought thousands of people back from the abyss of the alt-right, or white identity politics. Both Peterson and Brand have been willing to take great personal risks and to dive into dark places in the service of humanity. And yet the two men are obviously very different, but in what way? Let me put forward a seemingly crazy metaphysical idea. Peterson embodies the male archetype and Brand the female archetype. Bear with me for a moment. Let's just accept the fact that male and female characteristics actually exist in gay, straight, and yes, even transgender people, and are not merely a social construction. That each person is a combination of those traits, whether they be male or female. Let us talk about sexual traits even at the risk of being called biological essentialists, another nasty way to say that biology is an illusion. Let's suspend our political agendas just for a moment. Obviously, Brand is much more feminine in style and attitude, and Peterson is much more masculine. Brand looks like a 70s rock star. He could easily wear heels and makeup. Peterson reminds me of Jimmy Stewart, the gentleman archetype of the 1950s. I'm not saying Brand is not manly, only that he is a gender bender. To complicate the issue, Peterson also has feminine characteristics, a motherly compassion for young men, for instance. But that is another matter. Gender is not a simple subject. Peterson's insistence on logos or truth speech and brave sacrifice make him much more prototypically Apollonian. Brand is fluid and frenetic. He can never stop moving or talking. He is a Dionysian seducer, shifting between male and female. Peterson is all about verticality, judgment, clarity. Brand is about cosmic consciousness and inclusivity. The topics they discussed on the recent podcast also illustrates this male-female dynamic. While Brand waxes on about motherly compassion for different tribes, Peterson insists on judgment and discrimination. Peterson has pointed out that you can't have an ideal without judging yourself against it. Brand is all about empathy and universality. To put it another way, Peterson is vertically oriented. He speaks about hierarchy. Brand is horizontal. He speaks about universality. The two make very good dance partners, energetically speaking. They complement each other. It is more than interesting that Peterson has become popular, in part through his intellectual dance with tricksters, comedians, and gender benders. Is there another irony here to explore? How great it would be if more of such opposite types would have such civil conversations with each other. To conclude, the people who really change the world often come not from the center, but from the edge. And yet, they meet in the center. As John Lennon put it in his classic song, a working class hero is something to be.